The Galactic Unity Station was a breathtaking sight, a massive structure floating in deep space, housing representatives from hundreds of alien civilizations. It was a place of peace, diplomacy, and cultural exchange. For centuries, species from across the galaxy had come here to form alliances, trade agreements, and discuss universal laws. For humanity, this was a historic moment. Ambassador James Carter and his delegation had just arrived at the station, ready to establish stronger ties with the interstellar community. It had been only a few decades since humans had first made contact with alien life, and now they were finally being recognized as an emerging power. Carter, a man in his mid-40s with sharp blue eyes and a confident posture, walked through the grand halls of the station. His team of diplomats followed closely behind, their faces filled with both excitement and nervousness. Meetings with alien species were always unpredictable, but Carter had been trained for this. Inside the Grand Diplomatic Chamber, representatives from various species sat at a large circular table. Some had smooth, shimmering skin, while others had armored exoskeletons. Some were towering giants, while others were small and insect-like. Despite their differences, they all shared one thing: a deep curiosity about the newcomers from Earth. Carter took his seat across from Xyrath, a high-ranking diplomat from the Drakari Empire. The Drakari were a reptilian species, covered in dark green scales, with sharp eyes that gleamed like polished emeralds. Their civilization was one of the most powerful in the galaxy, known for their strict warrior culture and deep respect for strength. The meeting began smoothly. They discussed trade agreements, technological exchanges, and potential scientific collaborations. But then, the conversation shifted to culture, and that's when things got strange. Xyrath leaned forward, his sharp claws tapping against the table. "Human," he said in a deep, rumbling voice, "I have studied your species, but there is something I do not understand." Carter smiled politely. "Of course, I'll do my best to answer your questions." Xyrath's tongue flicked out briefly, a sign of curiosity. "Your people lack a mating season." The room fell silent. Several alien representatives turned their heads toward Carter, their eyes widening in surprise. Some whispered among themselves, while others simply stared in shock. Carter blinked, caught off guard. Yes, that's correct." Xyrath leaned back, his expression unreadable. "Impossible." Carter chuckled awkwardly. "No, it's true. Humans don't have a specific season for reproduction. Unlike many species, we, can reproduce at any time of the year." The silence deepened. A small insectoid alien named Click-Tack, who had been quietly observing the discussion, suddenly made a panicked clicking sound. "You mean anytime?" Carter nodded. "Yes." Xyrath's tail twitched. "And you say your species develops and advances without interruption?" "That's right." Xyrath's eyes widened slightly, and for the first time, he looked genuinely disturbed. This changes everything." One of the other diplomats, a feline-like alien named Valoran, tilted her head. "So let me understand this correctly. You humans do not have forced hibernation periods. You do not suffer from population cycles. Your civilization does not pause for generations of recovery." Carter shook his head. "No, our progress has been continuous. We don't have forced downtime like some species do. Our advancements in technology, culture, and warfare have been steady throughout history." Click-Tack made another anxious clicking noise. "That is unnatural." Carter raised an eyebrow. "For us, it's normal." Xyrath let out a deep breath. "No wonder your species has risen so quickly. You have no natural limitations." His claws tapped against the table again. "For the Drakari, our population increases only once every 20 years. Our soldiers, our scientists, our workers, we must wait for the next cycle to grow our numbers. Every civilization here faces similar limits. But you," he pointed a clawed finger at Carter, "you do not." The realization spread through the room. Some delegates whispered urgently among themselves. Others looked at humanity with newfound respect and concern. Valoran narrowed her feline eyes. This means humans are always ready for war. Carter frowned. That's not necessarily true. We seek peace, just like everyone here. Hi-Raf gave a slow nod. Perhaps, but peace is only one outcome of power. Click-tack shifted nervously. If humanity can expand without limit, then one day they may rule us all. The tension in the room thickened. Carter could feel the shift in the air. What had started as a simple cultural discussion had now turned into something far greater. The aliens weren't just surprised. They were afraid. He forced a calm smile. I assure you, we are here as friends. Humanity has no intention of ruling over anyone. As Irath studied him carefully. We shall see. Ambassador Carter, we shall see. And with that, the meeting continued, but the atmosphere had changed. The galactic unity had always seen humanity as a rising power. But now, they saw something else. Something far more dangerous. The realization had set in. Humans had no limits. And for the rest of the galaxy, that was terrifying. The meeting had ended, but the tension still lingered in the air. Ambassador James Carter walked through the quiet halls of the Galactic Unity Station, his thoughts swirling. The way the alien representatives had reacted to humanity's reproductive freedom had been unexpected. He had seen shock, fear, and even something close to awe in their eyes. Behind him, his assistant, Dr. Emily Rhodes, a cultural expert, walked briskly to catch up. That was something, she said, adjusting the tablet in her hands. Carter let out a breath. Yeah, I didn't expect that to be the most shocking thing about us. Emily glanced around, lowering her voice. Did you see how the Drakari reacted? It was like we had just told them we could breathe fire. Carter smirked. Honestly, that might have scared them less. They turned a corner and entered a private meeting room where the rest of the human delegation was waiting. The team had been watching the discussions remotely, and now everyone looked concerned. Dr. Mark Vasquez, a political strategist, crossed his arms. Well, that was a disaster. Carter raised an eyebrow. I wouldn't say disaster. Mark scoffed. Oh, really? Because from where I was sitting, half the Galactic Council just realized that we have no biological limit to expansion, and the other half looked like they were preparing a doomsday plan just in case. Emily sighed. He's not wrong, Carter. Most species here have cycles. They reproduce, then stop. Their economies slow down, their armies shrink, their research takes a pause. That's how their civilizations work. But we don't stop. Ever. To them, that's terrifying. Carter ran a hand through his hair. So, what are we saying? That the entire galaxy now sees us as a threat. Before anyone could answer, the door chimed. A voice came through the intercom. Ambassador Carter, Diplomat XI Rath, requests a private meeting. The room fell silent. Emily and Mark exchanged glances. Carter straightened his jacket. Send him in. The doors slid open, and XI Rath stepped in, his reptilian eyes sharp and unreadable. He moved with controlled precision, his long tail swaying behind him. As the doors closed, he wasted no time. I must speak frankly, Ambassador Carter, XI Rath said, his voice low and serious. Your species is unlike any we have encountered. Carter gestured to a chair. Please, have a seat. XI Rath shook his head. No, I do not need comfort. I need truth. He took a step closer. You claim that humanity seeks peace, but your biology does not allow for peace. Your people will grow, spread, and expand without end. What happens when there is no more room to expand? Carter met his gaze. We adapt. We find solutions. War is not the only answer. Cyrath's eyes narrowed. That is what concerns me. Your kind never stops. You will always need more resources, more land, more influence, And when peaceful solutions no longer work, his voice dropped lower. Your people will take what they need. Carter exhaled slowly. Xirath, humanity has faced that question before. On Earth, we fought wars over land, over resources, over survival. But we also learned. We built alliances. We chose cooperation over destruction. That's why we are here, speaking to you, instead of conquering blindly. Xirath studied him for a long moment. Then, in a slow, careful motion, he sat down. Emily whispered to Mark, "That's the first time I've seen a Drakari sit voluntarily in a negotiation." Xirath tapped a claw against the table. "Your words are reasonable, Ambassador, but reason is only part of reality. Fear is the other." Carter folded his hands. "And you fear us?" The Drakari diplomat let out a slow breath. "We fear what you could become." Silence filled the room. Carter understood. The fear wasn't about what humanity was now, but what it could be in the future. A species without limits, without enforced pauses, one that could continue to grow, adapt, and thrive while others were forced to rest. Xirath's claws clicked against the metal table. "There are those in the Council who already see you as a threat. Some will push for restrictions. Others," his eyes darkened, "will seek to eliminate the problem before it begins." Emily stiffened. "Are you saying there's a faction considering a preemptive strike?" Xirath didn't answer, but the silence was enough. Carter leaned forward. "You came here to warn us." Arth nodded once. "Yes, not all Drakari believe in blind aggression. Some of us value wisdom over war. But if humanity does not act carefully, you will have many enemies. The galaxy does not trust what it does not control." Carter took a deep breath. "Then tell me, Xirath, what would you do if you were in our position?" Xirath was silent for a moment. Then he said, "You must prove that you are not a threat, but also that you cannot be defeated." Mark muttered under his breath, "Great, that's not complicated at all." Carter ignored him. "And how do we do that?" Xirath stood, his tail swishing behind him. "You must make allies. True allies. The kind who would fight beside you, not just trade with you. There are many species who are weak alone but strong together. If you unite them under your cause, even the war-hungry factions will hesitate before acting against you." Carter nodded. "That's actually good advice." Xirath's expression didn't change. "It is necessary advice." He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "You are an unusual species, Carter. I do not know whether that is a blessing or a curse, but I do know this. If war comes, it will come soon. And humanity must be ready." The doors slid open, and he was gone. Silence filled the room once more. Emily exhaled. "Well, that escalated quickly." Mark rubbed his temples. "No kidding. So what now?" Carter stared at the door where Xirath had left, his mind already racing with possibilities. "Now," he said, standing up, "we start making friends." The Galactic Unity Station was never truly silent. Ships arrived and departed in an endless dance, carrying diplomats, traders, and explorers from hundreds of different civilizations. But within the grand halls of the station, the atmosphere had changed. Ever since humanity's reproductive nature had been revealed, whispers filled the corridors. Some species were fascinated, others terrified. The idea that humans had no biological limits to their expansion had shaken the foundation of galactic politics. And nowhere was this fear more evident than in the secret chambers of the Drakari High Council. Xirath stood in the dimly lit room, facing a circle of Drakari leaders. They were older, their scales darker, their eyes sharper. These were not mere diplomats. These were the rulers of the Drakari Empire, military strategists, warlords, and advisors who had guided their species for centuries. At the center of them sat High Warlord Vekthal, his powerful form towering over the others. His scales were nearly black, his presence commanding. He stared at Xirath with an expression of quiet calculation. You believe the humans are dangerous. Vekthal's voice was deep and steady, like a distant thunder. Eglyrath nodded. Yes, High Warlord. Their lack of a reproductive cycle has allowed them to grow continuously. While other species must pause, they do not. While we wait for new generations to reach maturity, they already have soldiers, scientists, and workers ready to take their place. One of the war advisors, General Kozor, flicked his tail in irritation. This is nothing new. We have faced enemies with numbers before. Head. This is different. It is not just their numbers. It is their speed, their ability to adapt. Their history shows they do not remain stagnant. They do not wait for nature to guide them. They take control of their own evolution. When their world became difficult to survive in, they did not retreat or go extinct. They built machines, created medicine, changed their very way of life to overcome obstacles. Another warlord, Counselor Torvesh, narrowed his reptilian eyes. And you are certain they are not just another empire that will rise and fall like the others? Irath clenched his jaw. They are not like the others. Every species before them had natural limits. Their expansion slowed, their golden ages faded. But humans, he hesitated before continuing, his voice lower. Humans do not decline. When they reach an obstacle, they do not stop. They break through it. Vekthal tapped his claws against the stone table. So, you say they are a threat. But do they know they are a threat? Exhale. That is the problem, High Warlord. I do not believe they seek war. Not yet. But their very existence challenges the balance of power. Their mere presence forces the galaxy to reconsider everything. The War Council exchanged glances. For a species like the Drakari, which had built its strength on a carefully controlled warrior system, the idea of a species that never stopped growing was unsettling. The Drakari had war cycles. Their armies expanded during population booms, then shrank during decline periods. Every civilization in the galaxy followed similar natural patterns. But humans did not follow the pattern. And that was what made them terrifying. Vekthal finally leaned forward, his eyes cold. Then we must decide now. Do we let them continue their rise, or do we stop them before it is too late? The room fell into silence. The weight of the question hung in the air like a storm cloud. Meanwhile, back at the human embassy, Ambassador James Carter sat in a quiet office, reviewing reports. Across from him, Dr. Emily Rhodes scrolled through data on her tablet, shaking her head. "You're not going to like this," she said. Carter looked up. "Tell me." Emily tapped the screen. "We've intercepted some unusual communications between certain Drakari factions. It's not confirmed yet, but it looks like some of their war leaders are discussing possible containment strategies for humanity." Carter frowned. "Containment strategies." Emily sighed. "It's a polite way of saying they might be planning something against us." Mark Vasquez, their political strategist, leaned back in his chair. "Great, so they're scared of us. That's not surprising." Carter rubbed his temples. "Fear leads to bad decisions. If they decide we're too dangerous to exist, we could be facing an attack." Emily hesitated before speaking. "It's not just the Drakari, James. Other species are also growing uneasy. The Yilvarin Coalition, the Zyre Empire, even the normally peaceful Volari have started questioning whether humanity's expansion will disrupt the galactic balance." Carter let out a deep breath. "So, what's our move?" Mark shrugged. "We do what we do best. Talk, negotiate, make allies." Emily nodded. Xirath himself warned us that some factions will want us gone. But he also suggested that we find allies. There are plenty of species who don't have military power on their own. But if we unite them... Carter's expression hardened. "Then we shift the balance in our favor before the Drakari can do anything." Mark smirked. "You know, making friends to counter a possible war is a very human thing to do." Carter stood, his determination clear. Then let's remind the galaxy why humanity never stands alone. In the dark halls of the Drakari High Council, the warlords whispered of war. In the bright corridors of the human embassy, diplomats prepared for alliances. The game had begun. And in this battle, survival would depend not on who was stronger, but on who was smarter. The tension in the Galactic Unity Station had only grown. Every species now knew the truth about humanity's limitless expansion, and while some remained neutral, others saw this as a danger that needed to be dealt with immediately. Ambassador James Carter sat in the human embassy, watching the holoscreen in front of him. Reports were coming in from various sources, showing increased military activity from the Drakari Empire and their allies. They weren't openly declaring war, but they were preparing for something. Emily Rhodes, the cultural expert, entered the room with urgency. "It's getting worse," she said, dropping a datapad onto the table. "The Drakari have started secret talks with the Zyre Empire. If they form an alliance against us, we're in serious trouble." Mark Vasquez, their political strategist, frowned. "The Zyre are one of the strongest naval forces in the galaxy. If they join the Drakari, we'll be surrounded." Carter rubbed his temples. "We need allies. Fast." Emily nodded. "There are smaller civilizations that might be willing to work with us, if we act quickly." Carter straightened in his chair. "Who's on the list?" Emily pulled up a holographic display, showing different star systems. The Volari Republic, a peaceful species, but they control a massive trade network. If they side with us, it'll cut off resources to the Drakari. Mark tapped another star system. The Karali Collective, a species of engineers. They don't have a strong military, but their technology is years ahead of everyone else. If we win them over, we'll gain access to advanced weaponry and defenses. Carter nodded. "We split up. Emily, you handle the Volari. Mark, you go to the Karali. I'll deal with the Yilvaran coalition. They've been looking for stronger allies for years." Mark smirked. "So, it's a race." Carter stood up. "It's a race for survival. A diplomatic gamble." Emily's shuttle arrived at the Volari homeworld, a planet covered in massive floating cities. The Volari were an avian species, their feathers shining under the artificial suns of their capital. Inside the Grand Chamber, High Chancellor Vel Seri listened as Emily made her case. "The Drakari want war," she said, standing firm. "They fear us because we don't have limits, but we're not here to conquer. We want allies. We want peace. And if they attack us, they'll attack anyone who stands in their way, including your trade routes." Vel Seri tilted her head. "The Volari do not fight wars, Ambassador." Emily smiled. "You don't have to. Just cutting off supplies to the Drakari will slow them down. Without food, fuel, and weapons, their armies will weaken." The High Chancellor considered this. Then, after a long pause, she finally spoke. "The Volari Republic will support humanity, with trade embargoes on the Drakari." Emily exhaled in relief. The first step had been taken. A deal with the engineers. Mark Vasquez arrived at the Karali homeworld, a planet of towering machines and endless factories. The Karali were small, rodent-like creatures with brilliant minds. Their leader, Grand Architect Leuven, listened as Mark explained the situation. "We don't want war," Mark said. "But if the Drakari attack, we'll need better technology to defend ourselves. If you help us, humanity will guarantee the safety of your world and your people." Leuven tapped his metallic claws on the table. "We do not fight wars, but we do build. If we share our technology, what do we gain?" Mark grinned. "A place in history. When humanity rises, we take our friends with us." The Grand Architect smiled. "Then you have our support." The final push. Meanwhile, James Carter stood before the Yilvaran High Council. The Yilvaran were a proud species of warriors, their culture built around strength and strategy. They had remained neutral for centuries, avoiding major conflicts. Carter knew he had to convince them. The Drakari fear us because we grow, because we adapt. But we are not their only target. If they eliminate us, they will look for the next threat. That might be you. The council leader, High Warden Greltor, narrowed his eyes. You ask us to fight a war that has not yet begun. Carter shook his head. I ask you to prepare. Stand with us, and we will ensure that the Drakari never turn their eyes on you. Stand aside, and you may find yourself fighting them alone. The room was silent. Then, Greltor stood. The Ylvarin coalition will stand with humanity. Carter let out a breath of relief. A dangerous shift. Back at the Galactic Unity Station, the human delegation gathered. We did it, Emily said, smiling. The Volari are cutting off Drakari trade. The Corelli are upgrading our defenses. The Ylvarin are standing with us. We have allies. Mark crossed his arms. Yeah, but that also means the Drakari know we're preparing. If they were unsure about war before, they won't be now. Carter nodded. Then we don't wait for them to strike first. We send a message. Emily raised an eyebrow. What kind of message? Carter's expression hardened. One that tells the galaxy, humanity is here to stay. The war had not yet begun, but the pieces were moving, and humanity was ready. The Galactic Unity Station had never been so tense. The balance of power was shifting, and every faction knew it. Humanity had moved quickly, securing alliances before the Drakari could act. But now, the real challenge was about to begin. Ambassador James Carter stood in the human embassy, looking over a holographic map of the galaxy. Red markers represented the growing influence of the Drakari Empire, while blue symbols showed humanity and its new allies. The lines of war were becoming clear. Emily Rhodes walked in, her expression serious. We just got confirmation. Drakari forces have begun military exercises near Ylvarin space. It looks like a show of power. Mark Vasquez frowned. A warning. More like a threat, Emily said. They want us to back down before we get stronger. Carter exhaled, then turned to the large display in the room. Then it's time we send them a message of our own. The broadcast. Within hours, every major species in the galaxy received a transmission. The screen flickered, revealing Ambassador James Carter standing tall. His voice was calm, but his words were firm. To the leaders of the galaxy, and especially to the Drakari High Council, I know you fear us. Across countless worlds, leaders and civilians alike listened. You fear humanity because we do not have limits. Because we adapt, because we grow. You believe that our existence threatens the balance of power. That if we are not stopped, we will spread beyond control. In the Drakari war chamber, High Warlord Vekthal watched the message in silence, his claws gripping the stone table. Carter continued, his gaze steady. But hear me now. We are not here to conquer. We do not seek war. Humanity only asks for the same right as any other species, the right to exist, to thrive, to carve out a place in this galaxy. On the Corelli homeworld, engineers and scientists paused their work, listening. In the past, many species have feared the unknown. They tried to destroy what they did not understand. But history has shown that fear leads to destruction for both sides. In the Volari Republic, traders murmured among themselves, wondering what the future held. If you strike at us, we will not run. We will not surrender. We will stand together, alongside our allies, and we will defend what is ours. Let there be no misunderstanding. Humanity will survive. Silence followed as the message ended. Across the galaxy, leaders debated their next move. And in the war chambers of the Drakari Empire, Vekthal's expression darkened. The Drakari's decision. The Drakari High Council gathered in a massive stone hall, torches burning along the walls. The leaders of the Empire sat in a circle, discussing their next move. The humans are rallying support, General Kazor growled. If we wait any longer, they will become unstoppable. Councillor Torvesh hissed in agreement. We must strike now. a full invasion before their alliances solidify. Vekthal remained silent, his sharp claws tapping against the stone table. Finally, he spoke. "No." The room fell silent. "Not yet," Vekthal clarified. "The humans have positioned themselves well. They have allies, technology, and a strong defensive stance. If we attack now, we risk a costly war that may not go in our favor." Khazor frowned. "Then what do we do?" Vekthal's eyes gleamed. "We test them. A smaller battle. A strategic strike. Something to gauge their strength and their weaknesses." A slow grin spread across Khazor's face. "A provocation. Force them into a fight on our terms." Vekthal nodded. "Exactly. We find their weakest ally, and we make them regret ever standing with humanity." Trouble on the horizon. Back at the human embassy, Carter, Emily, and Mark sat around a table, reviewing the aftermath of the broadcast. "It worked," Emily said. "The Volari Karali and Yilverin have doubled their support. More species are reconsidering their stance. Some are even thinking about joining us." But Mark interjected, "Not everyone is happy. The Drakari are too quiet. They're planning something." Carter nodded. "We need to be ready. If they test us, we can't afford to hesitate." Just then, a priority alert flashed on the screen. A message from the Yilverin Coalition. Emily quickly opened it, and her face paled. "Oh no." Mark leaned in. "What is it?" Emily looked at Carter. "The Drakari just launched an attack on Varnus IV, a small Yilverin colony. They're targeting one of our allies." Carter's expression hardened. "Then we have no choice. It's time humanity proves we don't just survive. We fight." The news of the Drakari attack on Varnus IV spread quickly. It was no longer a political game. This was war. Inside the Human War Command Center, James Carter, Emily Rhodes, and Mark Vasquez stood before a massive holographic map. The display showed Varnus IV, a small but strategically important colony of the Yilverin Coalition. Red markers indicated Drakari warships in orbit, while blue signals represented Yilverin defenders, outnumbered and struggling. Carter's face was grim. The Drakari didn't waste any time. They want to break our alliance by showing that our support is worthless. Emily crossed her arms. "If we let them take Varnus IV, our other allies might lose faith in us. They'll think we can't protect them." Mark slammed a fist on the table. "Then we hit back. Hard." Carter nodded. "Agreed. We send the fleet." Emily hesitated. "This is our first real battle against the Drakari. If we lose..." Carter finished her sentence. "Then humanity loses everything." A moment of silence filled the room. Then Carter gave the order. "Deploy the first expeditionary fleet. It's time to show the galaxy what humanity can do." The battle for Varnus IV. The first expeditionary fleet emerged from hyperspace just outside Varnus IV. The fleet consisted of 3 heavy cruisers, 5 destroyers, and 10 smaller frigates. Not a massive force, but enough to make a statement. On the HSS Endeavour, Fleet Admiral Lucas Hayes observed the battlefield. The Drakari warships were already bombarding the Yilverin defenses. Fires raged on the surface of the colony. Hayes opened a channel to the fleet. "This is Admiral Hayes. Our mission is simple. Drive the Drakari off this planet. No retreat, no surrender. Today, we prove that humanity is not to be underestimated. Engage." The human fleet advanced. Drakari warships turned to meet them. Their vessels were heavily armored, with jagged black hulls and glowing red engines. Their weapons fired plasma bolts, streaking through space toward the human ships. "Incoming fire," a tactical officer called out. "Raise shields. Evasive maneuvers," Admiral Hayes ordered. The first exchange was brutal. A human frigate was destroyed instantly, torn apart by Drakari plasma cannons. But the human ships fought back. Railguns and missile batteries unleashed devastating firepower, striking the Drakari ships with precise, calculated force. The battle turned chaotic. Fighters swarmed through space, dodging enemy fire. Explosions lit up the darkness. The HSS Titan, one of humanity's heavy cruisers, took a direct hit to its engines. It spiraled out of control, slamming into a Drakari warship. Both ships were engulfed in fire, disappearing in a massive explosion. But the humans didn't falter. Destroyers flanked the enemy, using speed and agility to outmaneuver the bulky Drakari ships. Missiles locked onto weak points, striking hard. One by one, the Drakari forces began to falter. On the HSS Endeavour, Admiral Hayes saw an opportunity. Concentrate all fire on their flagship. Take it down. The Drakari flagship, a massive battleship, turned to escape, but it was too late. A coordinated strike of missiles and railgun rounds slammed into its hull. The ship broke apart, debris scattering in all directions. The remaining Drakari ships hesitated. Their leader was gone. Then they retreated, vanishing into hyperspace. The battle was won. The aftermath. On the surface of Varnus IV, Yilvaran soldiers watched as the human fleet cleared the skies. Survivors of the Drakari attack emerged from the ruins, looking up at the ships that had saved them. In the Yilvaran Command Center, High Warden Greltor sent a message to James Carter. "You have kept your word, human. The Drakari thought you were weak. They were wrong." Carter responded with a simple sentence. "We stand by our allies." Across the galaxy, the news spread. The Drakari had attacked. Humanity had fought back. And humanity had won. The other species took notice. Some, like the Corelli, became more committed to their alliance. Others, like the neutral factions, began to wonder, if humans were this strong now, what would they become in the future? And in the heart of the Drakari Empire, High Warlord Vekthal stood before his war council. "They are stronger than we expected," he admitted. "We must be cautious." General Khazor growled. "Caution is weakness. We must crush them before they grow even stronger." Vekthal narrowed his eyes. "Then we must prepare. The next battle will not be a test. It will be a war. A dangerous future." Back at the Human War Command Center, Carter, Emily, and Mark reviewed the battle reports. "We won today," Mark said, "but this was just the beginning." Emily nodded. "The Drakari won't stop. Next time, they'll come in full force." Carter leaned forward. "Then we make sure we're ready. Humanity has taken its first step into galactic war." He exhaled. "And we're just getting started." The battle for Varnus IV had changed everything. Humanity had proven its strength, but the Drakari were not defeated. They were only just beginning. Inside the United Earth Defense Council, James Carter stood before a large holographic display. It showed the growing Drakari fleet, their war movements, and the danger they now posed. The galaxy was watching, waiting to see what would happen next. Emily Rhodes adjusted her glasses. Reports confirmed the Drakari are mobilizing. Their fleets are gathering near their borders. We don't have much time before they strike again. Mark Vasquez crossed his arms. They won't make the same mistake twice. This time, it won't be a test. It'll be a full-scale war. Carter nodded. Then we prepare. We rally our allies. We upgrade our fleets. And when the Drakari come, we make sure they regret ever underestimating humanity. The Drakari's next move. Deep within the Drakari Empire, High Warlord Vekthal stood on a massive warship overlooking his army. Thousands of soldiers, engineers, and warlords were preparing for battle. The defeat at Varnus IV had been a humiliation, but the Drakari were not a species that accepted defeat. General Khazor approached. "The humans have grown too bold. We should crush them before they gather more strength." Vekthal's sharp claws tapped against the metal railing. "Not yet. We must be careful. The humans fight with strategy, not just strength. If we charge in without a plan, we will suffer another loss." Khazor growled. "Then what do you suggest?" Vekthal's eyes gleamed. We strike where they are weakest. We force them to make mistakes, and when the time is right, we wipe them out. Khazor grinned. Then let us begin. The Drakari fleets launched, heading toward their next target. The call to arms. As the Drakari prepared for war, humanity wasted no time. The United Earth Fleet doubled its efforts. Factories produced new warships, powerful weapons, and advanced defenses. Soldiers trained harder than ever before. The leaders of humanity met with their allies, the Yil-Verin Coalition, the Kareli Republic, and several smaller factions. They formed a plan. Carter addressed the gathered leaders. The Drakari believe they can break us, that if they hit us hard enough, we will fall apart. But they don't understand what it means to be human. When we are threatened, we don't run. We don't surrender. We fight. We survive. And we win. The room erupted in agreement. The Alliance of Free Worlds was officially formed, a united front against the Drakari threat. The war had begun. The first strike. The Drakari's first move was an attack on Kelta Prime, a key supply world for the new alliance. If they succeeded, they would cripple humanity's ability to support its war effort. But the humans were ready. The HSS Valor, one of Earth's most advanced warships, led the charge against the incoming Drakari fleet. Admiral Lucas Hayes stood on the bridge, his expression calm but determined. All ships, prepare for engagement. No mercy. The battle exploded in the skies above Kelta Prime. Missiles, railgun fire, and plasma bolts filled the void. Human ships maneuvered with deadly precision, using their superior tactics to outflank the enemy. Drakari warships fought with brute force, relying on heavy armor and devastating firepower. A human destroyer was lost, but so was a Drakari battleship. The fight was brutal, but humanity was holding its ground. As the battle raged, a squad of elite human soldiers, led by Commander Elias Gray, landed on Kelta Prime's surface. Their mission: disable the Drakari ground forces before they could establish control. Blasters fired, explosions shook the ground, and the battle for Kelta Prime turned into a desperate struggle. The turning point. The Drakari were fierce warriors, but humanity had something more: the will to survive, to push beyond limits, to refuse defeat. On the HSS Valor, Admiral Hayes saw an opportunity. All ships focus fire on their command carrier. We take it down, they'd fall into chaos. The fleet adjusted its strategy. A coordinated missile barrage targeted the Drakari flagship. The massive ship shuddered, explosions ripping through its hull. The Drakari forces hesitated. Their leader was gone. Commander Gray and his squad secured the ground base, planting explosives in key locations. Within minutes, the Drakari ground forces were wiped out. Seeing their plan fall apart, the remaining Drakari ships retreated. The humans had won again. The message to the galaxy. With two major victories, humanity's reputation in the galaxy changed. No longer were they seen as a young, weak species. Now, they were a force to be reckoned with. Other factions took notice. Some, like the Volari, began negotiations to join the alliance. Others, like the neutral Sindari, debated whether to support the humans or stay out of the war. And deep in the Drakari Empire, High Warlord Vekthal sat in his war room, watching the battle reports. Khazor slammed his fist on the table. They were supposed to be weak. Vekthal's expression was unreadable. We were wrong. Khazor growled. Then we launch everything. Destroy them before they become unstoppable. Vekthal slowly nodded. Yes. No more games. No more tests. We bring our full might upon them. The Drakari fleet, the largest in their history, began to mobilize. The final battle was coming, and humanity would be ready. The future of humanity. In the United Earth Defense Council, Carter, Emily, and Mark watched as reports of the Drakari's next move came in. Mark sighed. They're bringing everything this time. Emily crossed her arms. And so are we. Carter nodded. This is it, the fight that will decide the future of humanity. He looked out at the stars. We didn't start this war, but we will finish it. The war for the galaxy had begun, and humanity was ready to make history.